Hello, friend, and welcome to the Prodigal Son series. Coming to America. Sorry, I'm not on my way to America. Probably I shall one day visit the US. But this time I'm talking about this movie, Coming to America, by Paramount, starring Eddie Murphy. And by the way, I have a disclaimer here. This is not a movie review, it's a sermon teaching. Well, Coming to America is a story about a certain African prince who flew all the way from Africa to a far country, and to America in this case. And he did that incognito. The prince went and lived in a rodents-infested ghetto, away from the honors and the glory of his father's kingdom and the palace where he'd come from. He did not reveal his royal identity to anyone since he had an objective. So, what was his mission? He was searching for a bride, a lady who did not know him as royalty, one who did not have any idea about his background as a future king. He was searching for a lady who genuinely and unconditionally loved him. Well, the movie is a masterpiece, but that's according to me. That said, those who have been to far countries can easily relate with coming to America, since life in far countries is significantly a stranger's den. In far countries, nobody cares about the background of the other. Very few people reveal their true identities, since people living in far countries are basically aimed at fulfilling their particular goals. And so, this is what happened to the prodigal son when he gathered his inheritance and went to this far country. He was in a stranger's land where he had no relatives, no friends, no people who knew anything about his personal background. In short, nobody cared a lot about him. That is how life is in a cosmopolitan far country. Everyone is equal to each other, unless you somehow rise up the social strata and position yourself in a particular cadre. Now, let us read from Luke chapter 15, verses 11 to 19. Luke 15, verses 11 to 19. And he said, a certain man had two sons, and the young of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falleth to me. And he divided unto them his living. And not many days after, the younger son gathered all together and took his journey into a far country, and there wasted his substance with riotous living. And when he had spent all, there arose a mighty famine in that land, and he began to be in want. Verse 15. And he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine. And he would fain have filled his belly with the husks that the swine did eat, and no man gave unto him. And when he came to himself, he said, How many hired servants of my father's have bread enough and to spare, and are perished with hunger? Now, verse 18. I will arise and go to my father, and will say unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. Make me as one of thy hired servants. I'm sure those who passed by, those who saw the prodigal son languishing in poverty, in hunger, mocked him, especially some of those friends whom he used to drink with, those whom he used to party with, and those ladies he spent his money with, those whom he bought goodies and gifts. They all passed by and saw him languishing in the pigsty while feeding the swine. He probably called them out by their names. Hey Tina, Ann dear, Rebecca, Mary my dear, honey, give me something to eat. I'm hungry, I'm dying. I need some bread, please. Hey, my sweetheart. But sadly, they all turned the other way in defiance. He was no longer a favorite. He had no money for parting, and therefore he was their liability. The prodigal son was there, miserable and dejected. All his colleagues, whom he previously spoiled with their celebrations, turned the other way, and none of them was willing to be associated with him. It hurts so much when the one you loved, the person you sacrificed your meager savings and paid tuition for and serviced their mortgage, now turn the other side, especially at this time when you seriously need their support. And this is what happened to the prodigal son before he came to himself and remembered home and his father. See what he says in verse 18. I will arise and go to my father. Friend, today I'm speaking to that gentleman, that lady, this one who is in such a far country, who happens to have ended up in such a predicament. The one whose friends have refused to even receive your calls, who have gone to the extent of blacklisting you. Those who are now claiming that they do not know you simply because you have exhausted your resources. Those who, after exploiting you, after abusing you, have dumped you to the dogs. I'm here to tell you, these people who have no idea about your background or where you've come from, how I wish they know where you came from. I wish they know who your father is. One might judge me from my predicament, my dressing code, my state of wealth, my health, my job, where I stay, how I live. But little do they know who my father is. Like in the movie, they see you scavenging and assume that you're just another loser. How I wish they know your father. How I wish. Let me talk to them on your behalf. Allow me to talk to them. Friend, don't mock me because I live in the ghetto. Don't deject me because I'm over 40 years and still single. Stop pointing fingers at me because it's 6 years now since I got married and have no child. Yes, I'm jobless. Fine. I'm bankrupt. I'm illiterate. Fine. But one thing you do not know, you have no idea who my father is. Hey, I might be messed up, but you do not know my father. I might be living in a slum or under the bridge, homeless, but you do not know my father. I might be hustling, feeding hogs. Go on, mock me, proceed, because you do not know my father. How I wish that you knew my father. My dear, these far country folks do not know your father. They watch the prince feeding swine in tatters, going hungry, and nobody knew that he was a son to a king. No lady was willing to be associated with him, let alone getting married to such a wreck. After all, who would marry a young man feeding swine, living in the pigsty, talking like a hog, smelling like a hog, and probably he looked like a hog, and definitely he was a hog. Who would marry this poor guy in a slum settlement? Who would marry this lady working as a desperate nanny, working as an illiterate laborer? And you almost lament with Solomon in the Song of Songs. That is Song of Songs chapter 1 verse 6. Look not upon me because I'm black, because the sun has looked upon me. My mother's children were angry with me. They made me the keeper of the vineyards, but mine own vineyard have I not kept. You may reject that poor man grazing swine, yet I wish that you knew his father. Do you know the owner of those cattle upon 1,000 hills? I wish I could tell you about that shepherd boy. I wish I could tell you about that bathroom cleaner, that toilet cleaner. I wish I could tell you about that waiter, that butler, the one you're assuming and taking for granted because you are in a far country. Remember, Joseph was a prisoner. He was a prisoner in a far country, a maximum security prison. But in a short period of time, he became a prime minister in that far country. Imagine all those fellow prisoners and the prison's staff, his colleagues. They thought that Joseph was just an ordinary prisoner with no roots. What they did not know is that he had a father. How I wish that the swine knew who was taking care of them. The swine saw a poor, desperate lad who was desiring to chew the pods and husks that they were eating, and probably snorted at him, mocked him, despised him. But the fact is that they did not know his father. The swine, like the scavengers of Masai Mara in Kenya, were waiting for the prodigal son to succumb to his predicament so that they could embark on his carcass for a meal. In fact, it wasn't the prodigal son watching over the swine. It was the swine watching over the prodigal son with evil intent, of course, waiting for him to drop dead for a meal. Poor swine. They did not know he had a father, and that he was worth the fatted calf. He was worth a very beautiful robe, a ring, a golden ring, and sandals, and a party. How I wish the swine know your father. Naaman, the leper, the army general with his power, his military credentials, his medals, was saved through that slave girl in that far country. The slave girl who used to wash his dirty garments. That slave girl who used to prepare meals for him. That slave girl who did not have the looks nor a career, who was also from a different tribe and culture. That slave girl, that lady saved this desperate general. Naaman did not despise this far country slave girl because he did not know her father. They are looking down upon your ministry because they don't know your father. Pharaoh in Egypt did not despise this slave, supposedly criminal prisoner, Joseph, who was a prisoner yet could interpret dreams. He was in prison, but his dreams were not in prison. You may be living in the rural country, but your dreams and visions are not confined there. How I wish they know your father. He is so loving and merciful. He has the power to change life for good. He has the power to turn around your predicament. He has the power to heal you, to give you peace, to lavish you with his unconditional love. How I wish they know your father. Otherwise, they would stop mocking you. They would stop mistreating you. They'd stop taking advantage of you. They'd stop abusing you. They'd stop bullying you. Friend, stop suffering in that far country. Say goodbye to that far country and return to your father. You have exhausted your finances in that far country, exhausted your strength, your happiness, and all that's still up against you, my brother. Your friends have rejected and neglected and dejected you. Nothing seems forthcoming, my sister. Remember, you have a caring father. Your loving father is beckoning anxiously, waiting to receive you with open arms and a celebration. My dear, you have a father who cares. My father.